Hello, nerds. I'm Laurence MacNaughton, author of the Dru Jasper series, starting with It Happened One Doomsday. And you're joining us on Generally Nerdy.
Quiet on the set. Rolling.
Hi, I am Bitsy Telek.
Hey, I'm Hale Appleman.
I'm Walter Kane.
I'm Rene Aubergenois. Odo on Deep Space Nine.
Michael Dorn, Lieutenant Commander Worf, Star Trek The Next Generation.
Come and see me and hear me and talk to me and listen to me talk about myself.
Hey man, this is Kevin Smith, often considered generally nerdy, and you are listening to what is often considered generally nerdy.
On Generally Nerdy.
You're listening to
Generally Nerdy.
Generally nerdy.
Generally nerdy.
Okay, cool. We're good. We're rolling. All right. I'm good to go. Whoop, as I bump the table and everything moves.
Yeah, don't do that.
So, first of all, how was Mile High Con last weekend?
Mile High Con was fantastic. I got to say that growing up, I never went to a lot of cons.
Right.
And only lately have I started getting out there and doing it. I had an experience at the Denver Pop Culture Con last summer, which I went for the first time. It was the last year that they were called ComicCon. And I went there, and
That's probably why your name looked so familiar when
really?
Samantha reached out to me. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, probably. So I went there to the con, and I'd never been to a Comic-Con before. It was overwhelming, and I saw, there's all these crazy costumes. There are people dressed up as TIE fighters, and they had, X-Wing fighters, all this stuff. And then I saw somebody dressed up as, I forget if it was Superman or Spider-Man or somebody, pushing a Dalek. And I thought, that is so bizarre. And then I noticed there was a little window in the front of the Dalek.
Right.
And that there were little handles on the back. And I realized that someone using a wheelchair had a Dalek costume. And they had built the costume over the wheelchair. And I thought, it brought tears to my eyes. I thought, this con is such a special place.
Yeah.
And it's just such a wonderful experience that people from all walks of life, you can dress up, you can put on a costume, you can go, you can be a fan, and you can be part of this huge, wonderful thing. And at that moment, I said, I've got to go to more cons. I've been missing out this whole time. So that was a really great experience. So,
right.
And then, I just went to Mile High Con, you're asking about, which is also a great con, especially for
literary, especially, yeah.
Exactly. They've got a lot of books. They're very supportive of authors. Mm-hmm. It's all panels. Everybody got to talk about. Let's see. I was up on a panel about creating PG-13 monsters for young adult. We got to talk about all kinds of stuff. So it's a lot of fun. It's very exciting.
So, speaking of your panels, I mean, we'll get back to Comic-Con. There was this year, because you brought up the wheelchair and the Dalek, this year there was a guy in a wheelchair that made his wheelchair into the Iron Throne.
Oh my gosh.
So he was rolling around on the Iron Throne. It was really awesome. I couldn't because I do a cosplay music video every year at Comic-Con, and I couldn't, I saw him in passing, while we were on the floor, so I couldn't really stop because he had a big cosplay, and I was like, we're going to be in everybody's way, but it was really awesome. Anyway,
cool.
You at Mile High Con, you said you did a couple of how-to kind of things, right? Mm-hmm. You were talking about things that were basically helping other authors. You do that a lot on your website, too.
I do. As a matter of fact, a friend of mine, Janice Hardy, runs a website called Fiction University. And we were talking one day. We have the same agent. And I said to her, I write these articles. I've written for Writer's Journal, Writers Forum, all these, big-name writing magazines. And I said, when I just post articles on my website, my fans get to see it, but I want to reach a broader audience. So she said, do you want to do a column on Fiction University? I said, yes, please. So I do a column every month. I personally am very much of the nuts and bolts sort of method when it comes to fiction writing. I don't have a lot of patience for people who are wishy-washy or say, such and such is open to interpretation. It's like, sometimes it's not, sometimes it's boom, boom, boom. That's how you do it.
Right.
So I try to approach it in a very user-friendly way and give people concrete nuts and bolts techniques that they can use to write fiction and just have fun doing it.
So you're not much, and I've only recently learned this terminology, actually from listening to Joe Rogan of all things.
Oh, yeah?
You're not much of a pantser then, I take it.
Well, people talk about plotters versus pantsers,
Right.
like they're two mutually exclusive things.
And I don't. Yeah, you're right. I don't think they are. I think if you plot something, you can only plot so far, and then the character itself has to take you, right?
Well, and that's a very good point. What I like to look at it as, and by the way, I'm very much of a plotter. I like to plan out everything, but I like to look at it as more of a weather forecast. Like,
sure, okay.
Like, I think it's going to be sunny tomorrow afternoon. I'm not 100% sure. So going into a novel, I plan out everything, and I have, I do a lot of prep work.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm always open to inspiration, because here's the thing: you never have all of your good ideas
right
in the beginning.
Right.
You're going to have more good ideas later. So
Right.
you have to know when you can say. When you can let go of an idea when you come up with a better one.
So, that being said, so the book that you're here talking to me specifically about, and
I probably should have brought it with me.
I probably should have too. I have it on the back of my couch table for whatever reason.
Uh-huh.
Like I'm about 2/3 of the way. I was hoping to be done with it by the time we did this,
Oh,
but
thanks.
things happen and deadlines.
So you're jumping in on book 4 of the series.
I am jumping in on book 4, but it's really cool because you don't necessarily have to know. Like, there are some things that you put in there, like, all right, so maybe I should have read the previous 3 books because I would know more about what they're talking about. But you give enough information, even though it's only like 300 and so many pages, right? So you give enough information, even though it's that short of a length, that you don't necessarily have to know, which is really cool. But
well, thank you very much.
Why young adult?
Oh, well, I have a lot of young adult fans. This book series in particular is not actually young adult, because the protagonist and all the characters, they are all grown-ups.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I mean,
But it's very PG-13.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I interviewed, speaking of Denver Comic-Con, about 3 years ago, I interviewed an author named Eric Lassiter.
Mm-hmm.
Laster, rather. Sorry, Eric. I did that in the interview, and he's like, no, Laster. Sorry, dude, sorry.
Oh.
Anyway, I interviewed him, and I learned something about young adult from him, because I also reviewed his book, like I'm going to do for Forever in a Doomsday.
Oh, thank you.
But his book struck me as slightly more adult than young adult.
Right.
And it was my first, even though his main protagonist was like 16 or something in the book, there was a lot more like adult themes than I was anticipating. Because I'm used to young adult to me before I read that book, and then going into yours, because everything that I could find on the billing for your books is like young adult author. And it was like, I mean, there's not like sex scenes that I've seen.
I just refer to it as urban fantasy.
Sure.
And, every author approaches it differently. But a young adult story is specifically one where you have a younger protagonist, usually in their late teens, who is forced to make adult decisions that they are not necessarily prepared for.
Okay,
so
good.
you could call it a coming-of-age story.
Right,
That's
right.
a common thing. It's basically, they are not specifically, prepared for the sorts of situations that they're in, and they have to take that step and make that decision and go on that journey and grow as a person. And how they grow is what determines the theme of the book.
Sure.
So in that respect, a lot of those sorts of stories blend over in with urban fantasy. And urban fantasy is just any story that has magic, monsters, something like that. It's a fantasy
set in
story.
kind of a modern
But it's a
setting.
modern setting. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a city. There are plenty of great urban fantasy stories and books out there that are, set out in the middle of nowhere. But so there's a lot of crossover in not only readership, but just in the stories and in the authors themselves.
So, but the thing I think that has people pinning you as a YA author is because it is family friendly.
Right. I specifically made a decision that I did not want to go very dark. I did not want to go very gory or very explicit.
Which is interesting because it's magic. So
Well, yeah, true.
Usually the association with magic is, something dark is going on, which kind of, in this book, and I'm not really giving anything away because it happens in the first friggin' chapter, is that you get the wraith.
Right.
That attacks them, and that's dark by nature, but the way you tell it isn't very dark.
Well, see, here's the thing. A big reviewer, and I forget who it was Publishers Weekly or Book List or one of those, Kirkus, one of those big ones, referred to it as the most fun you can have reading about the end of the world. And now, see, I'm going to spoil this. I don't actually blow up the world in any of my books, but in every single one, there is a doomsday threat that the world is going to be destroyed because of the actions of bad people.
Right.
Yeah, and only the heroes can stop it. And so, because things are so grim, that gives me an opportunity to go very, very funny and action-packed and without a whole lot of angst. There are moments in there where these characters just get tortured. I mean, at the end of Forever in a Doomsday, it's down to just Dru Jasper, the main character, versus the bad guys. And she just has to go through the most punishing ordeal in order to have a chance to save the world. And I kind of look at that as an opportunity to reflect on, I guess, an outlook on life. I feel like life can sometimes grind you down to the point where you feel like you're going through this terrible ordeal. But at the end of the day, I still want to, personally, I want to have a positive outlook on life. Sure. I want a story that makes you feel like you want to stand up and cheer. You know, I want you to walk away from this book feeling charged up and excited and that rather than, I want to qualify that by saying that I put a lot of work into the villains to give you villains who have a real point to them. They're not just, muhaha,
not just
villains.
mustache twirling.
What I try to do is give the villains a real rationale. And there is a speech that one of the villains gives near the end of this book where he basically justifies all the reasons why the world should be destroyed. And
his Thanos moment, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. And if I do it right, then you're going to be reading along thinking, does he have a point? I mean, he makes some interesting,
Right.
So that's my point, is to give you a glimpse into this darker, deeper, outlook at the world, and then to say, you know what, the theme of the book is much more positive, much more life-affirming. At the end of the day, it's all about friends helping each other. It's about saving the world. It's just a lot of fun.
So because it is relatively family-friendly, it's very family-friendly.
I do drop the F-bomb every once in a while.
Yeah. Sure, but that's in modern culture. There's that's a little more lenient.
Right.
You don't there's no blood and guts, and there's no sex, and there's
nothing explicit.
Yeah. So, aside from the occasional F-bomb, so who would you say then are your contemporaries? Would you maybe Charlene Harris or
Yeah.
Because that was the definite vibe I was getting when I was in the first few chapters. I mean, obviously hers is rural, and yours is presumably somewhere like Denver.
Right. Actually,
that's where you live.
Yes. The whole
I
series
recognized a couple of the street names and so on and so forth. So I was like, he's writing about his neighborhood. Well, kind of.
Yeah, I write about a fictionalized version of Denver.
Right.
I take great liberties with the layout of the streets.
Sure.
And part of that is because I do so many car chases.
Which is really interesting. I don't know if I've ever read a car chase that was like, wow, this feels like I can be cinematic.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
You know what I mean?
Well, I actually, before I became a writer, I was a prototype vehicle test driver.
Yeah, I saw that in one of your bios.
So
I was going to ask you about that. So good that you brought it up.
Yeah, thanks. So there's a lot of stuff that I cannot talk about. I'm not allowed to talk about, but...
NDAs are a horrible thing, actually.
But just to give you an idea, basically what I used to do is I used to take these vehicles that were built, the technology was several years before it was going to hit the street. And they would sort of build it into a chassis that looked like a current vehicle.
Right.
Even though we're testing
so you didn't have too many questions.
Exactly. For example, this is not a project that I was involved in, but when GM was developing the new mid-engine Corvette, that's a completely different body configuration from a front-engine Corvette.
Sure.
They didn't have anything to hide it in, so they literally built the world's ugliest pickup truck. Right? They built it over this thing and then drove that around on the street.
Huh.
So that's an example of the sort of lengths that people would go to hide
Sure.
these things. So my job was basically to find out where things would break. And we did it very safely. We never exposed anyone on the street to any sort of danger. We would do a lot of highway driving, in terms of reliability testing, stuff like that. And then back before Guanella Pass was paved, back when it was just rocks and dirt, I had a test route where I would take these experimental 4x4s up over the rocks and try not to fall down the mountain.
Wow.
Yeah. And there were times where there was a term that we used, thermal event.
Okay.
which is code for you're going to need a fire extinguisher. Because you're not allowed to say
that it started on fire.
Exactly. Because what will happen is years down the line, if any of those vehicles ever catch on fire,
that's grounds for a suit because
exactly.
they knew.
Because they knew,
Yeah.
even if it was a completely different component.
Right.
I mean, yeah. So that was my job, was to basically break vehicles and write reports about that. So I have a lot of real world driving experience, and I wanted to find a fun way to put that in the book. So one of the characters that I came up with for this series, and turned out
is a car.
and it turned out to be okay. So this
is a demon car, which is
Yes.
which is an interesting. I presume in probably the first book is where Dru. It was Dru that,
Yep.
that tamed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where she tames the demon and puts it in a car, or it comes out of the gates of hell
so
as
in,
a car.
in the first book, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse
Right.
all have these demon possessed muscle cars, and I call them speed demons in the book. So, and what's neat is a lot of people have compared it to Stephen King's Christine. It's a car
Sure.
that can
Yeah, yeah.
drive itself,
Yeah.
and it can fix itself,
Right.
and it's evil. And that's the thing about Hellbringer, is that it starts out the series, it's a bad guy. It's actually trying to kill the heroes.
And Salem is super wary of it in this book, too.
Yes, and so all throughout the entire series, one of the supporting characters, a sorcerer named Salem, has been like, seriously, this is a demon.
It's a demon.
It's
What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. So in this book, in the 4th book of the series, in Forever and a Doomsday, one of the big questions is, can we really trust this demon? Because they're going to find out, they're going to have to take Hellbringer back to the pit where it was spawned.
Right.
And once it gets back there among its own kind, is it
gonna
switch
revert?
sides?
Right.
Yes. So as I was writing the book, I kept changing my mind about which
I was
way
going to
this
say,
was going
is
to
that
go.
one of those points
Uh-huh.
that you planned out, and then once you got there, it was like, I don't know if this is the way it goes.
And I kept going back and forth. And so I thought that the ending actually ended up being really surprising and really satisfying, because while I was writing it, I myself was in suspense about how it was going to go.
That's a very King thing to say,
Yeah.
because he often says that, I don't write the books, I'm just the medium through which the words come, and whatever pretentious nonsense.
Well, you do tend to find that certain things will work and certain things won't.
Right.
And so, as human beings, especially today, we have experienced so much story. Mm-hmm. We have watched so many movies, so many shows, read so many books, and we have internalized a structure for
3-act structure is a very internal thing now.
And
Yeah.
certain things, I mean, it drills down deep into the relationship between characters.
Mm-hmm.
Certain things work and certain things don't, and
I would say
you have to discover that.
in your book right now, the point at which I am is the end of the 2nd act. So I have yet to begin the 3rd act.
Okay.
But I'm super bummed. Like, I had it all planned out. This weekend I was gonna finish the last 5-6 chapters wherever I'm at. And was going to be super ready for today, and then I had 2 deadlines that just got out of my hands, so I do apologize. But
Well, that's all right. So who's your favorite character?
I don't know. I'm kind of a fan of Salem.
Oh yeah, I think it's interesting. It's sort of a personality test, because there are some people who tell me, "Oh, I hate Salem. He's so obnoxious." And
He
other
is
people,
a bit obnoxious,
Right.
But
That's
he's
a
also the
deliberate
most
choice.
practical,
Right.
and he's also the most logical,
Mm-hmm.
and that I can associate with that. But also, Rain.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one that's attracted to him, right?
Yeah,
She's like the big badass.
Exactly. She is one of Dru's best friends.
Yes.
And she's a bodybuilder, and she can turn into stone or metal just by touching it.
Which was a really, that was not expect, because again, I haven't read the other books, so
Oh,
I
that's
didn't
okay.
know
She-
that. And that scene
very first
towards
chapter,
the beginning of it,
yeah.
she does that, and it's like, okay, this just got a lot more interesting.
So the funny thing about this book, this series, is that it actually started out as a short story. And it actually started out where Dru Jasper, the main character, was a supporting character. She was just a throwaway character.
Oh, okay.
And
so is that related to Magic Carpet Ride and or Put a Spell on You?
Well, those are both. Magic Carpet Ride is the first, chronologically, the first Dru Jasper story. And then Put a Spell on You occurs a little bit later, probably after the first book. So, and then I have I guess that one would occur before the first book. And then I have another one coming out called, I wrote it. I should remember the title.
From Fear to Eternity?
From Fear to Eternity.
Is the next one that's coming out.
Yeah, that one's coming out. That's just a short story or a novella. I forget which. But anyway, so Dru was originally a supporting character in a book that I ended up throwing away. That I ended up scrapping.
So that book didn't even get published?
No.
Interesting.
I didn't. I was partway through writing it, and I was bringing it to some group of writer friends.
Right.
And they kept saying, "Oh, I really like Dru. I really like how she uses crystals to cast her magic spells." And
very apropos for the. I feel like there's a kind of an upsurge in the social acceptance of such things. Not necessarily like casting spells, but like the thought that crystals have power. And
well, here's the interesting thing, and I didn't know this until I started researching this, was that, you know, when I sat down to write this series, I thought, how many crystals are there in the world? Like, I don't know, 10, 12. I mean, there's like...
Little did you know.
There's quartz and like some other ones. And so I started researching this, and obviously there are thousands of crystals. And what I found was really interesting was how many ancient beliefs about crystals actually carry some weight. For example, the eye makeup that ancient Egyptians would paint around their eyes,
right,
they believed would protect them from the evil eye. Well, they used to make it out of ground up galena, which is a lead sulfide. Lead sulfide kills bacteria. So if you paint it around your eyes and an insect lands on your eyes,
you won't get an infection.
You won't get an eye infection that way, which is the most common way for those to be spread back then. So it was a real thing. Now, obviously, painting lead sulfide around your eyes is not great for your health, but they had a point there. So I was discovering all of these ancient things, and I thought, well, what if we can actually take these and turn them up to a superpowered level? What if Dru really can take iron pyrite and use it to create a magical shield?
Right.
You know, what if she can use cords to literally cleanse someone from evil? So these were really interesting.
The scene at the beginning of the book where Salem has them arranged and she powers them up to create an even bigger shield. And I was wondering how much research you had put into
an extraordinary amount of research. I'm serious. I read books.
In your research for that, though, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
In your research for that, I keep bumping this stupid table. Was there a lot of practical versus mystical uses that you found to be interesting that maybe you haven't utilized yet?
Well, I tried to blend things together. One thing that I found was interesting was that in the third book, there's a scene where Dru is backed into a corner and she's about to be attacked by this creature. And she's surrounded by all this old camera equipment and also a bunch of random junk, some costume jewelry, some other stuff. Well, those old flash bulbs, the kind that would pop when you set off the camera.
And then they're no longer good anymore.
Exactly.
You have to throw them away. Yeah.
And they kind of crackle. So the filament in there is actually tungsten filament, I discovered. Well, costume jewelry, starting in the late 70s in the disco era, they started to use cubic zirconium. Cubic zirconium is the crystalline form of tungsten.
I did not know that.
I didn't know that either until I started researching
it.
So I had a scene where Dru saves the day by charging up all this disco era costume jewelry because she can charge up the crystals to set off all these flash bulbs all at once because it's also the same element. So there's all these strange intersections that I find in my reading.
That is super interesting.
Weird, yeah. So there's all sorts of things like that. For example, Dru also has this huge collection of ancient books. with really weird names, really weird titles. And long time ago, I had, I worked at several different bookstores. I used to run a Walden Books, believe it or not.
Sure.
And before that, I actually worked at an antiquarian bookstore.
Okay.
And they had an original edition signed copy of Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, wow.
Which, believe it or not, has two different original editions. One came out in the UK, and then a year later it came out in the United States.
Are there editorial differences like Harry Potter?
I think they're very slight. Very slight.
Dracula
this was,
dies on page 367.
No, this was a long time ago. I mean, and so I wanted that book so badly. It was thousands of dollars. But anyway, but also at the other end of the bookstore, we had all these cardboard boxes full of ancient manuscripts. We're talking medieval manuscripts.
Wow.
Written in Latin. And nobody wanted them, and they were literally worthless. And I thought, that is so bizarre that I have something that somebody wrote centuries and centuries ago, and I can flip through it, and it's all musty, and it's all handwritten, and the ink is all faded brown. But it doesn't. You could. Nobody would buy it.
Right.
It doesn't belong in a museum. It's the strangest thing. So I used that as an inspiration for a lot of Dru's books.
Okay.
And actually, every single one of her books, I have all these funny, strange titles, and I don't remember any of them, but they're all based on actual titles of actual ancient manuscripts.
Okay.
There's one. There was a king of England in the early 17th century who actually penned a book about witches, if you can believe that. Yeah. So I mean, our history is so weird that you can actually research things that are so bizarre that people think, how did you come up with that? Well, I didn't really,
I just read it somewhere.
I just read it somewhere, yeah.
So you're doing about a book a year.
Right.
Slightly even more because No Sleep Till Doomsday came out, I guess it was May of 18, right?
Yeah, the publisher sets all the release dates, so...
So you made reference when we were emailing back and forth that you had a deadline you were trying to meet. So that means you're writing and researching basically constantly?
Constantly.
Or do you have any sort of social life that you're... I mean, you brought your wife here with you to the interview today, so it was like, is this their time together for the week? Or?
I'll tell you what, many people have approached me and asked me, how do you write all this stuff? Because I do more than just write books for a living. I also write magazine articles. I write... You were
or still are a copywriter? Is that...
I am. I do. Yeah. So I have a copywriting business where I write success stories and websites and all this stuff. So I'm writing constantly, constantly, all day long. And I have on my website, I have a ton of tips on how to write faster, how to organize your thoughts. I will throw something out just really quickly, something that just transformed my productivity as a writer. It's the acronym CODE, C-O-D-E. I use this every day. Every project, at least as far as writing goes, can be broken down into 4 phases. C is for collect, O is for organize, D is for draft, and E is for edit. So first you collect all of your ideas, and then you organize them into some sort of outline, even if it's just a bullet point list.
Right.
And then you write the draft, and then you edit. And I think where many people get hung up and where a lot of writer's block comes from is people getting the steps confused. They're trying to write it and they haven't organized it yet, or they're trying to get they're trying to collect some ideas and do editing at the same time. It doesn't work that way. The biggest offender is if you're trying to draft it and edit it at the same time. You can't do that. I can't anyway.
Right.
I have some friends who say, I work on one sentence until it's perfect and then I move on to the next one. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's an interesting methodology.
Yeah, so that's what I try and do, and I try and split it up onto separate days even with a lot of projects. So if I'm coming up with a chapter...
One day's all collecting.
Exactly.
One day. Okay.
So I'll do a lot of research, and then I'll organize it, and then I'll draft it, and then I'll edit it.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
That's almost... That could be applied to plenty of other creative outlets, too. It's like, again, I listen to whatever Joe Rogan fairly regularly, and listening to the creative process for like how stand-ups do their thing.
Which is very interesting.
But it's kind of similar, only it happens in rapid succession. So they'll collect at the beginning of the day, they'll organize as they're like on their way to the open mic or wherever they're doing it, and then they'll draft in the moment on stage and then edit after the fact and then go back through those processes the next open mic that they go to.
When you go and you watch a comedian, many times they will be using a lot of their established material.
Right.
And they're also testing new jokes to see what gets an audience response.
Which is kind of that collection.
That's the editing phase right there. Where,
yeah, for sure. Like I said, it happens so close together in that art form that it's really interesting, like to break it down and try and understand what they're doing. But then it's the same thing. Like I'm a musician, and writing a song is very similar. So I have 17 riffs. I just sit down and record 17 riffs and go, all right, so this one's in the key of G, and this one's in the key of C, and this one's, I don't even know what key it is. How do they fit? Do they fit? You know, so that's the collection, the organization. And then the drafting is taking it to band rehearsal. And this is my idea. And then the editing is everyone together edits out what doesn't work. So yeah, that's very interesting. You can totally apply that.
You're allowed to go back and forth between the different stages too. It's just important to be aware of them so that you're cognizant of
what stage you're in.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So, does that lend itself much to, like, do you go out to concerts or, I don't know, go see movies with the wife or that kind of thing? Do you read other people's work, or are you just so busy writing your own?
So you're asking me, do I do anything other than write?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I was saying earlier, I just got back from the gym. So
fair enough.
You know, and I think that it's important to do those things. You have to get out of the house. You have to interact with the world, because if you don't, then you know your body, your mind, your soul start to suffer. I think it's very important to have a broad variety of interests and explore those things.
Right.
You know, when I'm not writing, I'm also working on classic cars. I'm hiking and mountain biking. I do read so much. I have so many great books that I haven't gotten to yet. You know, I was in a conversation with someone.
I feel the same way.
And they said, "Oh, you should read this book." I said, "I've had that book for 6 months. I haven't read it yet." You know,
like Name of the Wind.
Right. So, you know, it's important to not sacrifice everything for writing.
Right. Because that's something that I've dealt with in the early days of the YouTubes, of my YouTube experience anyway, is balancing personal life with work. Because while this is a lot of fun, I do enjoy what I do very much.
Right.
It's still very much work. So it pulls me away from my girlfriend, and it pulls me away from going out to concerts and that kind of stuff.
You do have to put in the hours.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and people come to me and they say, "Oh, you know, I can't find time to write." And I tell them, "Dude, you have 24 hours a day. I have 24 hours a day. We all have 168 hours a week. So it's up to you to decide how you're going to spend those hours."
And some of those hours have to be sleep. So then that already narrows it down.
Right. So, but even if you sleep, you still, even if you sleep. But
I mean, there are those
sleep
who don't.
faster.
You choose one day a week to not sleep. I understand that if you're grinding that hard.
Well, here's the thing. You can afford 1 hour a day to do something that's going to transform your life.
Right.
Whatever that is, whatever your dream is, whatever it is that you want to get out there and do and accomplish and make yourself better, make the world a better place, you can spend 1 hour a day doing that. And if you do that, the transformative power of prioritizing that is amazing. You will never accomplish anything so big as when you make that a priority. Back before I became a full-time writer, and I've been a full-time writer for about 10 years.
Sure.
I had a day job. You know, I used to be a prototype test driver. I used to do different things. And I would come home in the evening, and my wife is an artist, and she would say, you know, "I really want to paint." I said, "I really want to write, but I'm really tired." You know, I worked all day. And so we said, okay, we're going to go into our creative spaces and just do it for 20 minutes. So we'd go in there and I would set a timer for 20 minutes. And the timer would go off, you know, and the first 20 minutes is always the hardest because you're exhausted after a full day's work.
Right.
And I would go in there for 20 minutes, timer goes off, and I say, well, she's still working. I'm going to work. I'm not going to quit before she quits. Before you know it, we've been down there for an hour and a half, 2 hours working. So the buddy system is incredibly powerful that way. I have friends who will just pop onto Facebook and send each other a message. Hey, I'm starting a sprint, Also, using a timer is incredibly effective. If you just set a kitchen timer for 15 minutes and you turn off all your devices, you don't check email, you don't check Facebook, you don't do anything else. You just do that.
Thing.
You'd be amazed how much you can get done in 15 minutes.
Oh no, that's something I actually learned from my sister as she's raising her really awesome kids. Because when I do Salt Lake ComicCon every year as well.
Okay, great.
And she's out in Salt Lake. So whenever I stay with her, she does this thing with her kids, 10 minutes of cleaning. We have to do 10 minutes of cleaning. And it's amazing what they can get done in 10 minutes. So if you do the same thing for your creative process, 15 minutes just...
Well, and the thing is with kids, you sort of just have to point them in the right direction, right? As adults, we have all this mental baggage. We have all this emotions tied up with these things that we want to do and all these reasons we haven't done them.
Right.
And we feel bad and all these things.
Right.
So if you set the timer, it sort of clears all that out. Mm-hmm. It's like, it doesn't matter how bad I feel that I haven't been working on this. Set that timer and ignore all that. Just focus on what you're doing. And what you can do is just amazing. I've gotten to the point now where I run my entire day in 30-minute increments. I set a timer for 30 minutes. A book came out a few years ago. A guy calls it the Pomodoro Technique.
I saw that on your website. Yeah.
So, but he didn't come up with it. People have been doing this ever since they invented kitchen timers.
Right.
So there was a famous copywriter back in the 50s who used to get one of those wind-up ones. He would do that, and he made a huge career out of it. But yeah, I'll run my entire day that way, where I set a timer for 30 minutes, focus on what I'm doing, get it done. Timer goes off. I'll go get a glass of water or whatever, and then come back to it. And by the way, I do recommend reading the Pomodoro Technique book, because he talks about, for example, the value of doing several sprints and then taking a break.
Yeah.
You come back refreshed. You can do more.
It's just like exercise even. You do those sprints and then you take that downtime to recoup, and then you go for another sprint.
I have a friend of mine who always tries to get in shape by doing all of his working out all at once. For a week, he'll do nothing but work out, and then he's like, "Oh, I think I hurt my back." I'm not surprised.
Maybe. Yeah. You might have, yes.
But here's the thing. So I got my start as a full-time writer, believe it or not, with a day job, because I had been working for another company that went out of business, and I was looking around for a job, and I was talking to my circle of business, my business network.
Right.
And my wife says, you should tell people that you're a writer. I said, no, I can't do that. I've never written professionally at this point. So I was telling everybody, oh yeah, by the way, I'm a writer, if you know anybody who needs a writer. And somebody said, well, I know this company, and they are starting this website, and they need someone to write content for their website. Okay, I could do that. And it turned out to be one of the biggest retail websites out there at the time. And they grew by millions of dollars while I was there. I don't think I was personally responsible for that. And basically what they did is they sat me in a cubicle and said, okay, we need as much content as you can possibly crank out, as fast as you can crank it out. What sounds reasonable to you? And I said, I don't know, maybe an article a week? And they're like, no. I'm like, a day? They're like, no. So I ended up writing 4 articles a day.
Sure.
Every day. So every 2 hours I had to write an article. Think about that.
Yeah, that's a lot of writing.
Think about that for a second. So 5 days a week, 4 articles a day is 20 articles a week. I did that for a few years.
Pushing how many words per article approximately? Like 1,000 words, 1,500?
500 to 1,000 words.
Okay.
But over the course of that year and a half, I wrote 1.5 million words for this company.
That's amazing.
Right? My fingers, like the cuticles, were peeling back from typing. So
you get home and not have that motivation to write. I would
exactly.
imagine.
It's like the last, if I have to type one more thing, I'm going to lose my mind. So I started studying all these old pulp writers from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, and these guys were working on manual typewriters, right? I have nothing to complain about. I have a manual typewriter in my office. I've had it for years. It's an old 1939 Remington, and I used to type on it, and it is hard work. So I studied the techniques of these old pulp writers, and you can find these out-of-print memoirs that they've written. A really good one is called The Fiction Factory by William Wallace Cook. It's the same guy who wrote Plotto, only he did it under a pen name.
Okay.
And he became known as the man who deforested Canada because he wrote so many books. At the time, he was the most prolific author of their time.
Right.
And so I studied their techniques. I learned how to write faster. And it's all because I don't want to toot my own horn. It's because I put my mind to it. It's because I was backed into a corner. I said, I have to produce content. And I did, and I learned. And so that's why I tell people, it's like, I was a driver, okay, before I was a writer. I literally got behind the wheel for a living. So if I can write books, you can write books. Anybody can do it. You just got to put your mind to it and do it constantly.
If only I had more memory card space and we could record those little bird walks, that would be awesome. Well, okay, so as you were talking about, the things that you do that aren't work, the thought came into my head. Do you carry like a little notebook with you, or even just the notepad on your phone?
Well, what I use, and gosh, I wish
everywhere you go, just in case you have that collecting moment.
Well, I wish I'd brought it with me, and I don't have it on me because we rushed over here. But but I tell people, don't bring a notebook, bring index cards.
Interesting. Okay.
And I have really solid reasons for this, because when you put something in a notebook, it's put down in a linear chronological fashion of when you thought of it. Mm-hmm. But when you put it on note cards, you can rearrange it into the order that it should go. Plus, note cards, you can throw them out once you're done with them. Uh-huh. You can pin them up on the wall. You can put them in a box or a sorter.
So when you're doing your ordering, that was the second stage, right?
Yeah.
Organization, ordering, whatever. When you're doing that organization, that helps remix the thoughts effectively.
Exactly. And I'll tell you more about a software solution to that in a second. But I actually have Levenger create something called an index card wallet, or I think they might call it a pocket briefcase is what they call it. And it's just this little leather holder that has little flaps on either side so that it acts like a clipboard. So you can have cards in the back, and then it gives you a little blotter to write on.
Sure.
And it fits in your pocket. It's the most beautiful thing. It's like $50, but it's wonderful. And I've had that thing for 10 years now. I carry it constantly, except for today. But that's what I tell people. Carry index cards around with you, because what you want to do is capture the ideas, because your brain will say, oh, I'll remember that.
Oh, no, that's the common downfall of a musician. I'll remember that riff. I don't have to record it.
Now, do you carry a little recording device that you can hum into it? Yeah, okay, there you go.
Or my little MP3 player that I have in my car has a microphone in it. It can do. So, like, if I'm at the store and I have a thought in the store, I'll run out to the car and push the record button on the MP3 player. Yeah.
I have just a little bit of experience with that. I'm not very good, but last year I started playing a theremin.
Okay.
Which, for those of you who don't know, is this weird thing that you wave your hands at it. Yeah, exactly. So that's a lot of fun. But anyway, so way back, I used to actually organize my books on index cards. I would jot down an idea on an index card, and then later on, I had this entire system with multiple cork boards in my office. This huge involved index card system. Today, I collect my ideas on index cards, and sometimes I'll keep them that way, but I'll sort them on the computer. I have a program that I use all day long, every day. It's called Scapple, Scapple.
Okay.
And it's created by the people who created, it's Literature and Latte is the company. They created Scrivener, which is a very popular writing software.
Okay.
But anyway, if you just Google Scapple, you can try this program out for free. And essentially what it does is it creates a blank space on your screen. You can click anywhere and create a note and just type into it. You can click somewhere else and create a note and type into it. And then you can drag these things around, and you can connect them with dotted lines. You can put pictures on it.
Oh, wow.
And before you know it, you've got a virtual representation of like what every detective has in every movie. You know what I'm talking about?
Have the yarn pieces connecting all of the mob bosses.
So that's what I do with basically every project, whether it's a book or an article or anything like that. I will do that, and it's a virtual version of using index cards.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mac has had the Notes application for a while, and I believe it was Windows 10. Windows started having that as a built-in app too. So I mean, it's not as versatile as Scapple sounds, but it's still kind of the same idea. You open up the notes, I think is what it's called, and it creates like sticky notes on your screen.
Right, and you can move them around.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in capturing things with a pen and paper or index card. Capture them on paper because there's a connection between your brain
and
your hand.
physical existence of
But once you get into the project, I like to move my notes into
some sort of digital space.
Exactly, and move that around. Yeah.
So, I guess that kind of brings us to the point where we're talking what's next. You've already said the name Forever.
Forever in a Doomsday. That's the newest one.
No, the one following is the one that's what we're talking about now.
Oh no, I have a short story coming out calling "From Fear to Eternity."
Fear to Eternity. Yes. That's the F word.
Yeah, it's just a short story. I've already written another book in another series that I'm not allowed to talk about yet.
Oh no.
Yeah, that hasn't come out yet. So, but that's coming.
Okay.
And then I love to give away short stories. I love to give away. Little teasers and insights into my series to my fans. So I have a newsletter. You can sign up on my website.
Right.
I send you all this cool free stuff.
And you have excerpts from the books up on your website. And you had, when you went to Mile High Con, at least, you had you were giving away freebies at the con.
Yep.
So what other cons? I mean, because Colorado, I guess in general, has a pretty high concentration of nerd conventions.
Right.
Mile High Con is honestly one of the oldest conventions in the country, which
is it really?
interesting.
Right?
Yeah, because this was year number
51.
50, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
wow, that's amazing.
San Diego Comic-Con has only been going for, I think it's like 38 years.
Oh, wow.
And that's like the big be-all, end-all of Comic-Cons. But then Starfest is local too, and they have a literary branch of Starfest, and they've been going for 40 years. Denver Comic-Con obviously is one of the newer ones because it's only been up for like 6 or 7. But then there's like Colorado Springs Comic-Con, Rocky Mountain Con, Fort Collins Comic-Con. All this. So do you plan on touching base on any of those?
Yeah, I want to check out all of these. Like I said, this is a very recent thing for me. I never used to go to cons, and I'm very excited because I think this is a great way for people to connect. So I'm really looking forward to getting out there. And if you run into me at a con, hit me up for something free because I'll have it on me. I promise.
I feel like the con world is kind of reaching a critical mass right now where they have to start not just focusing, because everyone calls their convention Comic-Con of some sort.
Well, I think the actual term Comic-Con is now trademarked because of San Francisco.
Which is ridiculous, but that's a whole other conversation.
We're not going to talk about that, yeah.
Because they were not the first ones to use it, but whatever.
I think what you're hinting at is I have noticed there's a big problem where people tend to be exclusionary.
Yes.
And they tend to say, this is the in group or this is the in crowd, and you're not part of that. And I think it's really, really important to break through that.
And I think with them, because it started out because everyone was focusing on comic books,
exactly,
and then things related to comic books,
right.
And then so that's branched out into movies and more pop culture wise. But now I've noticed, at least the last couple years at Denver Comic-Con, and even this most recent year at Salt Lake Comic-Con, there's more of a broader net that they're casting as far as content creators.
I think that's
there's
great.
A lot more authors.
Right.
There's an author alley, I think is what they call it at Denver Comic-Con or Pop Culture Con. Sorry.
Yep. That I've done.
But there was something similar at Salt Lake, and I'm sure they have something similar at San Diego, though I have yet to make it out that far. But
and part of that is because the way that we consume content is changing. And when I say content, I mean comic books. I mean
any sort of entertainment, reading. Because
today, for example, where do you draw the line between a show and a movie?
That's a conversation we have on the channel a lot.
Right?
Is how is the new streaming culture? Are these TV shows or are they 10-hour movies?
Well, and there are very many books, and this is something I'm planning on doing, where you can read the ebook. And then, I'm going to get in my car and switch over to listening to the audiobook version.
Oh, wow.
And then I'm done with, I'm on my lunch break and I want to read again. And you can switch back.
I saw that you had some excerpts of your books that you read on your website as well that hosted up on SoundCloud. SoundCloud hosts the audio version of this, so that's pretty cool.
That's cool. I think SoundCloud is a great way for anybody to reach out and connect in an audio sense.
Yep.
So that's what I mean. The lines are blurring between. It used to be just a book was a book was a book, but now you can have a book that's also an audiobook. Maybe you do a comic book version. Maybe they turn it into a TV show.
They're doing that. They're really starting to do that with just it's storytelling.
Right.
Rothfuss specifically, because he's my new obsession, or has been since I read Name of the Wind 8 years ago.
Right.
But he just sold the rights, or is working on the rights because Showtime dropped it. But Lionsgate bought the rights for a video game and a TV series and a movie, but they're not going to be necessarily adaptations of the books. The movies probably will be, but the series and the game won't be. And presumably there will be some sort of comic book form as well. They will all be expansions of his universe, and I think that's real. It will be other stories that Kvothe is telling.
Right, and that's neat.
And that's such a really interesting. So like the idea to even take that into a more mixed setting, like you're talking about, where you can listen to a chapter on the ebook and then get home and read the next chapter, and then presumably even watch the third chapter on your streaming service eventually. That would be that's really, really fun. That's really...
So that's what I mean. Things are blending and changing, and I think that's great because that's the nature of creativity is taking something and turning it into something else. So I think that getting back to what you were saying about cons, the important thing is for people to break down barriers, to be embracing to all kinds of people, all kinds of genres, all sorts of content, all sorts of storytelling. And then there's more for everybody to enjoy. And you never know what sort of connections you'll make, what sort of new things you'll discover.
Right.
You know, it's a brave new world, and I'm very excited about it.
So that kind of rounds us out. We'll drop the Laurence MacNaughton, M-A-C.
Yes.
I made that error when I first started doing the research. M-A-C, not just M-C.
Right. I have a really long name, and the funny thing was I actually went when I first got a literary agent. I said I want to write under a pen name because I don't know how they're going to fit my name on the cover of the book. To be honest with you. And she said, "No, you have such a writerly name, an authorly name."
That is very studious.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
There's actually a guy named Laurence MacNaughton who is, I think, a dentist in the UK. And every once in a while he gets emails from me. And he'll say, I believe this is for you. I said, thank you. Thank you, Laurence.
Spelled L-A-U?
Yeah, exactly
as well?
the same.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, our email address is like he has a period in the middle or something like that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the website, LaurenceMacNaughton.com.
Yeah, it's LAURENCE. MacNaughton. Yeah, it takes like 10 minutes to say that. Yeah. .com.
So you can go check that out. The books are all available on Amazon. You have distribution through, I always want to say Borders, and I know they haven't been a company for so long. Barnes and Noble.
I used to run a Walden Books.
Right.
Actually, yeah. No, the books are published by Pyre, the Dru Jasper series anyway, and they're distributed, I think, by Random House. They might have switched over to Simon & Schuster. But yeah, you can get them on Amazon. You can get them in Barnes & Noble. You can get them in tattered cover. I've done a bunch of books on there. You can get them at Broadway Books, Broadway Book Mall. Is that right? Oh, that's a place. You can get them. You can get them anywhere
books are sold.
Yeah, the Book Bar. I've done a few events there.
I think the biggest one is Amazon at this point. So as long as you're there,
I tell you what. But I love to support the independent stores.
Right. The brick and mortar mom and pop places for sure.
So and the nice thing about a place like Tattered Cover, for example, is that you can go in there and discover books that you would never see on Amazon.
For sure.
I found plenty of great books that way.
And there's one in Loveland, up where I live. Book Lovers. Or no, that's Fort Collins. Wampus Books, and there's a couple other great little stores like that where you go in. All right, so these are the books that I've read. Suggest something. Right.
And and I have friends and family who will say to me, "Well, where do I buy your books so that you get the most money out of it?" I'm like, it really doesn't matter. I honestly, in the business of books, I make about the same no matter where you buy it. So buy it at your favorite place, and if you like it, tell some friends about it, and better yet, bring a friend to the bookstore.
The only time you don't make money is if they buy it used.
Well, you know what? I've had people bring up used books to me to sign. I'm happy to sign them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's like, dude, as long as it's out there in the world,
as somebody's reading
and
it
you're
and
enjoying it, if the best thing that you can do, honestly, whoever you are reading, or whoever the author is, the best thing you can do is if you like a book, tell some friends.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that is the interview, nerds. Thank you guys for watching. Again, you can find Laurence on his website. You have social medias and all that. So everything's off of the website, though, so go check out the website. And also my website, generallynerdy.net. In case you found this on the audio version and are unfamiliar with the YouTube channel, there is YouTube, Generally Nerdy, all of the things. We're not going to do the proper sign-off because it's such a mouthful and I really get bored with it. So thank you very much, Laurence.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on, Dustin.
Yeah, no problem. And until next time, nerds, if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here.